tunafanya kusaidia traders wengine. It's equally to promote and develop the trade in second-hand clothing, a very vital part of the global circular in the textile trade. Incidentally, this association also covers jobs for women, youth, which is quite a big agenda for a country or rather a continent that has quite a youthful population. So this association is always very keen on growing the youth who are getting into that business. I've spoken about the taxes and how much they are putting into our economy and everything that we do. And at the end of it all, trying to provide affordable clothing or affordable apparel and clothing to all of us. But let's not just think in terms of how they provide this clothing, but equally how they're able to coexist with the textile industry. I was just having a chat with Kwame here in the morning, and he mentioned that I don't know if it's 2022 or 2023, our country was exporting up to 56 billion in terms of value for apparel. And that is excluding our local consumption. And when you talk about local consumption, you're talking about uniforms for our schools, all the overalls that are used in factories, nearly 80% of what is used by our uniformed officers. So you can imagine if we compare that to about 26 billion that is done by the Mtumba business, I think we definitely are not in competition, but we are trying to have a coexistence where the two can complement the growth of our country. So as we gather here today, I think what will really be expected of us in the room is just to find out ways and opportunities on how we can strengthen these sectors. How do we ensure that our partners in the Mtumba Consortium Association and everybody who's involved in that business complements the growth of our economy. The new textile business in the country. So, without much ado, allow me to invite our host for the day, and that is just welcome the representative of MCAK to welcome us here today. They are our special host, and it would be very unfair if they don't invite us. So, for a moment, please give a clap to one Peter Washira, who is the national. Someone is trying to fix something somewhere. But in the meantime, as they try and fix that, I'll just mention that it's good to speak about numbers. I think I've mentioned 26 billion somewhere, 56 billion somewhere. We mentioned 2 million people that this industry employs. We mentioned what they do. But for the next 6 minutes, we would like to have a visual and audio feel of what exactly happens in that business. This video is put together by the team, and I would like us just to spend a few minutes to try and put these figures and numbers into action.
This business, it has enabled me to educate my son all the way from primary school, secondary school, college life, and now he is working. So it has brought me from far.
Well, the mitumba industry is important in so many ways. The mitumba clothing, first of all, it employs a very large number of our population. We have a chronic unemployment situation in Kenya, so we are thankful that 2 million people are employed in that industry. We're also grateful that there is a widespread distribution system all over the country in which it provides clothing to 91% of our Kenyan population. That is millions and millions of people buy and wear second-hand clothing. The third element that as a legislator that I'm also grateful is the fact that we generate 18 billion shillings in tax revenues from the mitumba industry.
We made an estimate at the Institute of Economic Affairs, judging from the integrated household budget survey, and triangulated these data together with speaking to traders. And it suggested to us that in both direct and indirect forms, people who trade for either directly or in addition to other firms, they are close to about 1.8 to about 2 million people who trade in second-hand clothing, all the way from the people who bring in the bulk to those who break bulk in different markets across Kenya. So basically, all manner of markets, from urban markets, which are much bigger, such as Nairobi, all the way to smaller markets. So it's about something like 1.8 to close to 2 million people.
With regards to textile waste, it is a problem, but it's by far one of the smallest problems, would be my summary statement. And I think we also need to distinguish between textile waste from which source, right? The majority of textile waste we get, which is around 1% of our total waste stream, is post-consumer textile waste. So it's not imported textile waste, it's not factory textile waste, it's what people have worn and after multiple cycles of wearing are throwing away, right? And then with regards to imported mitumba or second-hand textiles, I think from our point of view, that waste stream is almost negligible because the vast majority, I don't know, 98% plus of the imported textiles are for reselling and reuse. So that's waste we're not getting directly. We might get it a few years later once those textiles have been worn and discarded, but not at the point of importing. Mitumba, they try to take you away. But mitumba, you're here to stay.
So if you look at it, Kenya's liberalization of import and the use of second-hand clothes actually happened most substantially in the mid-90s. By that time, most of the textiles industries in Kenya, which were established some by government and some by private firms, had closed down. General business conditions were bad in general, and also incomes had not been growing for a while. So if you look at that mismatch, it is not correct to actually say that the main shock to these industries was second-hand clothes in general.
The cheap textile industry, actually that is the biggest threat to our local textile industry, is the massive new textiles that are coming in from Asia, from India, from Bangladesh, and increasingly from China. We can't compete with the prices, the low productive cost, the quality of those clothes that come from Asia. So to say that actually mitumba and new textile industries are in competition is a false analysis. It's not correct.
Mitumba, mitumba, Nakupenda mitumba, 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 you're here to stay. Mitumba, mitumba.
Kutoka kwa mtumba naweza shukuru, at least nimeweza kujijenga.
Watoto kwenda shule, mimi hupata pesa kutoka kwa hii industry.
I believe if today the government decides to soften or to lower the prices of duty, of course the importers will also lower the prices.
Benefit sana. Jumali naishi, school fees nalipa, watu wangu kitu wanakula, I think kila kitu. Nilikuwa naishi rented house, hizi naishi kwangu. So ni mtumba.
The benefit is enormous. There's value added by sorting. So you become part of the supply chain. For example, clothes that are coming into this country today, into Kenya today, are being sorted in Europe, right? So a container of $10,000 from Britain going into Romania comes out of Romania actually valued at $15,000, right? So that's just an example. And that is just because it's been sorted in a certain way. However, we could actually have a sorting center here locally, shorten the supply chain and take the benefit, the economic benefit of a sorting center. Sorting centers are also labor intensive, so it would create huge employment opportunities. And in Kenya, we need that. The whole of Africa actually, but Kenya has a very large young population that is unemployed. And so we need to counter that. So sorting centers benefit in that way. They also will have an enormous environmental impact globally.
Yes, yes. I believe if today the government decides to soften or to lower the prices of duty, of course the importers will also lower the prices. And this will also affect the end person who is using the mitumba. So it will all be beneficial to the Kenyan people, to the people who are down there. Number one, let me tell you, mitumba has benefited mostly the housewives, people who have no education. They are able to raise their lives or their standard. Mitumba trade has also benefited university graduates, students who are now upcoming before they get their dream job. This is where they start. This is where they begin. Some of them have not even pursued whatever they were pursuing. They got into the trade, it was successful, they are doing it comfortably. So it is a business that the government should put their eyes on. It is one of the business that is bridging the gap. The government is always talking about creating employment. Mitumba trade is creating employment. Look at today's statistics. We are over 2 million. 2 million people. Half of those people are not educated. They are not people with technical courses. They are just people who knew the principle of buy and sell. So this is a trade that should be respected worldwide. It is bridging the gap. It is giving people hope. Even those who are down there, who everybody thinks they can become nobody. We have testimonies of people they don't have school education, but today they are millionaires. They are employers. They are doing so well. Thank you.
Kitu cha kwanza ni kanjo huwa wanasumbua. Hiyo ni policy ya kwanza. Maybe wanaweza organize na kanjo wawe tu wanakata either license ama wafanye vile hawatakuwa wanatulipisha on a daily basis. Cha pili ni kuleta mali. Kumekuwa na ukosefu wa mali kama vile nimesema. Wanaweza fanya bidii tukapata mali, itaweza kubenefit watu wengi na vijana wengi na pia watu wengi wanaofanya mtumba.
I think one of the things we have been fighting for and we are looking for and we are putting these suggestions to the government is that they should reduce the cost of duty. The cost of duty is costing us about $14,000. That money is going direct to the government. Duty, tax, and VAT, about $14,000 going direct to the government. The Mitumba traders are generating a revenue of 1 billion Kenya shillings per month. Mitumba traders, they are generating a revenue for the government, an amount of 1 billion per month. That makes it 12 billion per year. That is the revenue that is generated by the Mitumba traders.
One of the things that Kenya specifically could do is to create a sorting centre and have the right policies in place, because there is a danger with sorting centres that it could become a dumping ground.
Main challenge in Mitumba industry are the high taxes. If the government can reduce the taxes, Mitumba industry can be a bit better.
Currently, we are facing a big problem because of the pandemic. The effects of the pandemic, we are not able to get a good supply like before. We are encountering problems with the shipping. For example, some shipping lines have hiked their prices to very, very big margin. It's becoming very difficult, but we are also in communication with the government. We are requesting our government to soften or to ease the burden of duty with the Mitumba traders. One of our biggest challenges is the duty. 40-foot container is costing us a whopping $18,000 just to have one container enter Kenya. So the burden is also transferred to the small-scale trader and even to the last person. So those are the few challenges that we are facing after the ban was lifted.
This trade is being negated because of cheap labor. So for example, you know, you're paying very cheap labor in Bangladesh and in China to manufacture certain goods that are being sold in the global north. Now, for manufacturers to compete, they actually have to pay those kind of wages. The only way manufacturing can increase in Africa is by subsidies. The government has to subsidize manufacturing in Africa. Otherwise, it's not going to take off. We're not competing directly with Mitumba. It's a misunderstanding of the situation.
It took me back to how I started my entrepreneurial skills. So many years ago, when I was in media school trying to be a journalist, haven't been able to achieve that. I think the closest I've moved to being a journalist is Kutuma Salamu, for those who come from the west side of the country. But I'm hoping I'll move. We used to go to Gikomba markets, me and a friend of mine in the room, but he was in the morning. And replica jerseys. You could not find the many jerseys that you see. So they for the business. And I remember one time I found a jersey for Italy, the national football team. And I had mentioned earlier that my name is Paul. So it had they had a player called Paolo Maldini. And my street name was Paolo in school. So when I got that jersey, I figured out a way of covering that Maldini. And for the first time, Kenya had a football player in Italy in the name of Paolo, which was the guy who's speaking to you today. So I've played for Italy before. The videos might not be available. The audios might also not be available. But if you check the Italian team of, I think 1990 to 1994, they had a player called Paolo, and he's speaking to you today. Clap for me. See, Mariga went there quite late, so I was there before him, and I think I really set a good pace for the other African players that have desired to play for the Italian national team. Anyway, without much ado, we'd like to get a very interesting person who for a number of months now has been trying to help us figure out how the future of this industry that we will play in will be. We talked about what the numbers that are happening right now, but as an industry, as partners, as a legislature, and I'm happy we have a representative from the legislative team here, we need to figure out what policies do we put in place so that Apostle Teresia we don't watch her on TV 5 years from now talking about taxes. We need to figure out what can we learn from the distribution network, which scholars like Kwame will say, the supply chain. You know, there are a number of times I've been to the market in Gikomba, and it's interesting how by midday, traders in Migori, traders in Mombasa, Tononoka have all received their package. I think some of these multinationals and so even a government, two things, the phone number and a felt pen, and by midday everybody has received their package. I don't know how that trade is done. I've not seen, you just see lorries, you see a felt pen, you see a cell phone number, and in 5 minutes, mzigo imetoka. Isn't that great? If we could do that to medicine, if we could do that to all the other things, I'm sure my partners from MCAK, you should be consulted on how government can be able to send all these things in a go. Anyway, so our next speaker is a gentleman called Kwame Wino. Kwame, I think I've known Kwame for nearly a decade now. I'm still giving away my age as we speak. But Kwame is in charge of an institute called Institute of Economic Affairs, and he's been leading Kenya's strategic intervention as a think tank for not only sub-Saharan Africa, but I think the continent at large. You know, many times we speak about sub-Saharan Africa, but forget that all these other countries that are part of the continent are quite key in our growth. So Kwame leads research and policy dialogue in the economy and regulation and competition policy in the region. And he has quite a ton of knowledge. I've had him speak very fluently and eloquently on economic regulation, employment economics, and public sector reform in our country. And today he'll be with us to just try and help us understand what the future of our business is looking like. So, Kwame, karibu sana, that is a Spanish way of saying welcome. And the English way will be thank you. Welcome, Kwame.
Thank you very much. All right, good morning, everyone. Thank you. My name is Kwame Wino, and I'm glad for the very kind introduction by Paulo. So I'm going to make a presentation of a report that was done actually at the end of 2023, in January, and it was taken over. It was, thank you. It was a conversation that started between the Mitumba Consortium Association of Kenya and the Institute of Economic Affairs. And we just came by asking ourselves a couple of questions. Now, seated at the table right at the end of my left are my colleagues, together with whom we took this report, and so we had a conversation. And as you'll tell, the Mitumba Consortium Association of Kenya asked us 3 questions. And so those 3 questions are what we tried to answer. Now, as you can tell here, the title of this report is a feature look at the apparel and footwear industry in Kenya. And so we provide a context. So to the next slide, we provide the context. And in that context, let me just go back, step back and ask us, why is this report even necessary? Why is this report necessary? So we asked ourselves, why is this report necessary? So 3 things came to mind. One, we know that Kenya has a Vision 2030. The Vision 2030 has placed an ambitious plan for Kenya to grow, and by the year 2030, we're supposed to have highly prosperous country. And the Vision 2030, of course, is Kenya's blueprint for development, raising incomes, public welfare, and as you can tell, he has an economic pillar, transform Kenya into a leading industrializing and middle-income country by 2030. The social pillar is environmental sustainability, empowering women, youth, and other Kenyans. And then if you go to the continent level, there's the Agenda 2063 by the AU, which obviously it requires, I mean, it's aiming for a prosperous, integrated, self-reliant continent by the year 2023. And of course, central to that is great economic growth, industrial development, of course, trade, and a reduction in dependency. Now, so those are the two big pillars for Kenya's ambitions economically. One, homegrown, the other, of course, sharing continental ambitions. And then we asked ourselves at that time, there's an assumption in Kenya that industrial development requires less inputs, and especially to grow textile industry in Kenya would mean that the second-hand or the used apparel imports in Kenya would be, sorry. Oh my apologies. Sorry, she doesn't in the mirror. Thank you. Thanks. That's my colleague. They care about how I look. So let's go back to this. Thank you, guys. We were asking ourselves together with our colleagues at the Mitumba Consortium Association. There's an assumption, and a very strong one, expressed by, you see it in the media, you see it in different kind of, even our leadership sometimes says that, look, the imports of Mitumba correlates with the fact that Kenya does not have a robust textile industry. And therefore, from that comes the assumption that, look, we have to depress the demand or the imports of Mitumba so that we can have local industry growth. And that's a fair question to ask. But it actually is incorrect. And we hope at the end of this we'll give you evidence for why that is so. So that's part of why this evidence is necessary. That question comes here. But what we are asking ourselves then is, what are the objectives of our study? And because we say, look, if this is the question, then we need evidence, so we need to go through a fair process of determining whether that is true or not. And so this study that we presented to you has three objectives. So the first one is basically we hope that we will provide policymakers and industry people with accurate and reliable information about the nature of the Mitumba industry as you call it, right? Because they are common in the Mitumba industry, and often they see one side or the other. So either they look at the imports, on one at the other time they see it, they see collapsing industries, and then they make the association that those two are necessarily related. Our second objective is to assess the future of the sector over the next 15 years. We're asking ourselves at the end of 2023, what will this industry look like in 2023? I mean, in 2037. And our objective 3 is to just say, look at the scope. Is there a possibility for the coexistence of both the secondary imports industry, so the retail trade in Mitumba on one side, and Kenya's industrial growth, which is also basically up there. So those we hope at the end of this will help to answer. So once you've defined that question, I think because we have findings, we just like to let you know how we reached some of the conclusions that we reached. And so what did we do? Our methodology is this. First, I mean, economists and other people call it literature. But you ask yourself, what has been published? What is the evidence? What data? What exists? How are the other scholars defined this problem, and what evidence exists one way or the other for the question we are? So first, look at that. And we looked at research that has been conducted, we looked at government policy documents, and we looked at data. Then the second thing is to ask for economic data. It's one thing to say that Mitumba industry is what this or it's causing this effect. I think we needed to look at the evidence and ask ourselves who, and most of the evidence that we used are from databases by the government of Kenya. So for that reason, we are reliant to a very large extent on the National Bureau of Statistics in Kenya, which of course we all know. So to tell us about our population, to tell us about GDP, how much income, value added in the Kenyan economy, and how much clothing is imported, how much is produced locally, and we'll see that. Then we go into what now economists call evaluation and forecasting. So we evaluate by asking ourselves, okay, if this is the evidence, what is it telling us? What are the trends? How fast is the Mitumba industry growing, if at all? What kind of demand structure exists? What's the supply like? And then we drew some 3-4 scenarios, asking ourselves, what might this industry look like, and you see it in the year 2037. And after that, then we say, fine, this is the fact, and this is what the possibilities are. How does the government of Kenya, what should the government decisions be, which is the regulatory frameworks, to enable the possibility of coexistence between these two industries? One, consumer traders, and you've seen the number of people who are dependent on it, directly and indirectly. And two, growing local industry is not affected as well, negatively. So we first ask ourselves, what is the global second-hand trade? How does it look like? And what you see here is basically our picture of how the value chain, if you may ask, or how this industry is organized, where the value is created. We split it into 4 areas. And the first is collection, and you heard about collection, right? Before I used good or used clothes and apparel are sent somewhere, of course they have to be collected by somebody, right? So they have to be collected together. So obviously there are collection centers, many of which are in Europe and North America, sometimes in other parts of the world as well, but most of them, especially the ones that get to Kenya, come from North America and Europe, European continent. So they are collected global centers, through drop-off points, and of course some of them might be charity shops. But nevertheless, somebody has to collect them. And so they go, they're placed at a certain place, some collection point. Then they are sorted. So basically, it means that they have to be classified according to what value they will provide to the final consumer. So there's some sorting. So they're not random pieces of textiles put together as some descriptions that we see in different presses or different opinions expressed here. So somebody actually has to go there and carefully sort them for many reasons. One, what kind would be accepted in specific country and specifically Kenya. So they sort it thinking about the fact that, look, what kind of material is in demand in Kenya, what kind of material would be legally accepted in Kenya, what kind of standards have been imposed on it. So up there as well, some value addition is taking place because they're being classified and set to be able to, for acceptance by the demand side up here. So there are sorting centers in other parts of the world, some are in the Middle East, some of them are in North America and Europe, and they categorize them into reusable, for local or international migrants, which ones are recycled, and some, of course, which will be disposed because they will not be fit for market or they will not even be fit for use. So that's your second. Remember again, value has been added. It's come from a random collection. It's gone now to sorting to create different classifications, and then we come to the third area, which is then the imported. So an importer in Kenya would be importing. You can call it a bundle. You can call it a collection of something that's been collected, it's been sorted, so they know what it is it comes to. So remember, as this importation takes place, Kenya's imports come mostly from the European Union and North America. Of course, China also has been part, but basically it now comes here. So at this point, it is getting into Kenya's borders. Remember, the first two parts in the value addition process, or the value chain process, collection and sorting, are outside the country. So the first point of contact is importation. Coming into Kenya, having been classified, and what happens here? This is the point at which that container arrives at a port in Mombasa, right? And the first thing that happens is basically somebody will inspect it, and immediately, as we had Ms. Wadimu tell us, a check for $15,000 per container will have to be paid upfront. $15,000. Now remember, this is important for the conversations we have as Kenyans. Nobody's going to pay $15,000 equivalent, or $1.5 million, sometimes a little less, depending on what the exchange rate is, right? You're going to pay upfront unless you are clear that the material that you imported has economic value in Kenya. So this is an important question for the argument that you hear about dumping. You know, people say, look, there's a lot of dumping, and some people are dumping textiles things that should have been discarded. Who is going to pay $14,000, $15,000 for a container that is being dumped? That's a very important thing, because we Kenyans don't have a lot of money to be wasting like that. So please bear that in mind. So that's the importation part. So at that point, get into Kenya's borders, it's been classified, somebody from the Revenue Authority and other authorities will examine to say that this material is effective, but the first thing that has to happen before it leaves that port is somebody is going to pay. The owner of this property is going to have to pay their taxes, the draft of taxes, which comes to about, yes, 2022-23, based on the exchange rate, it was $15,000. Today, it's a little less, but it comes out to about $14,000 per container. So what that means is the amount of income that is generated for government at the port level itself would be $15,000 or 1.5 million shillings per container, and you multiply that by the number of containers. Out of that is what we determine. It usually comes to about, well, depends. It fluctuates from about 1, sometimes it gets to about actually 1.5 billion shillings per month over 12 months, based on the number of containers that were imported. And then after that, of course, the owner of the property has paid, the trader at that wholesale level has paid, and then they come in and then it's split into wholesale and retail traders and distributed in markets throughout the Republic. So remember, it goes through these basic 4 processes. In between there might be intermediate processes, but the main important thing is somebody has to do the collection, it has to be sorted, those two take place outside the Republic of Kenya, and then it comes into the importation, coming into the ports, and then of course it goes into wholesale and retail. So there are different people, different businesses connected to this process at each of those stages differently. So that's it basically. Now, so we've described the process in terms of what basically the value chain process is, from the collection, the sorting, importation, and then the trade, right? So let's go next and ask ourselves, okay, in 2023, what did the picture look like? Now, the declared imports, and remember, this is imports declared by the government of Kenya through the Customs Service, Customs Authority KRA. Well, in Kenya, in 2023, Kenya imported 197,000 tons of second-hand clothes, apparel. And so what would be some of the wide-ranging effects? So basically, there are jobs for 2 million people. Now, this number was independently verified. We looked at some information and data that the consortium had placed together going through their networks, and then we triangulated this data by asking ourselves, there are surveys that the government of Kenya has conducted for the number of households, and you looked at the number of households and asked, in these households, do they report a person who trades in one way, whether permanently or whether in season on the issue? So the 2 million people that we're talking, 1.8 to 2 million people that we're talking about here are people who are directly and indirectly connected to one trader, right? Yes. So it might be from the wholesale level, coming to the retail markets, and other people who are doing the transportation. All through that value chain are these number of people. So it does not represent households, it represents the number of people. As we heard from Paolo, the Italian passport holder who plays for the Italian national team from Kenya. Yes, so it included people who, you might be a student, right? So you're studying, but one part of the time, to keep expenses going, or because you like business, you're trading in one portion. So it's not permanent. All of them are not people who trade on the business on a 24-hour cycle. It might be people who actually extract a portion of their income in that trade, or might be employees of somebody else who does the business. So that's a really, really wide network. But that's a number we checked, and we don't cite it recklessly. We try to confirm it very, very carefully. So it's about 1.8. Again, this refers to the year 2023. So that's one. So of course it has a contribution to a global circular economy. How is this contribution to global circular economy? One of the claims about Mitumba that, look, it's an environmental disaster because you're bringing in used clothes from somewhere else and then dumping it. That argument from an economist's perspective is actually not sensible. Remember, you're going to pay $15,000 before the thing even comes in here. I don't know that there's a person in Kenya, if they do, they should come and give me those checks, who wants to just send 15,000 shillings to dump things that they do not need. $15,000. Remember, 1.5 million shillings just to dump things that it doesn't make sense, but it gets me. So it's a circular economy in the sense that you're allowing for the reuse of products that somebody else does not. So you're transferring that value to somebody else who might use it. that same person, the second person who's receiving it, is paying, and therefore it shows that they have, they value the amount that they're paying for it. It's giving them some surplus. So it contributes to a circular economy because it stretches the lifespan of these goods that we are speaking about. So it has an environmental advantage. It facilitates ancillary jobs and industry. As I say, the 2 million facilitates jobs of people who are trading directly, whether at wholesale, retail, import level, but at the same time, other people, as you heard, say a student, right, who in his spare time, in addition to be running, being a permanent student, is at the same time also getting schools, earning an ancillary income, or somebody who does the transportation, as you say. The same example that you gave. Look, bulk goods are imported, they're in a place in a big market in Nairobi, and somebody does the sorting. So sorting doesn't just take place when it's collected, sorting takes place when the bulk comes into Nairobi and somebody has decided, look, we're distributing this to Bungoma, we're distributing that to Migori, we're distributing that to be somebody who is definitely, directly and indirectly employed. So it facilitates the jobs of the transporters, of the people who do the sorting, of the people who do the carrying, of the people who do the breaking of bulk and all that. So that's basically it. It also provides affordable clothes for it. Again, we estimated this from the household budget surveys. You see the number of houses and you ask yourself how many people have purchased in the last month or so an item from the industry. And gave us the impression that 24.2 million Kenyans, based on the population size for 2022, had purchased one thing or the other from the industry. And at that time, it was 16 billion in government revenues, which was basically revenues for the imports, given the number of containers that are being imported, and as we had, about 1.5 million shillings per container at the point of import. So basically 1.5 million shillings divided by this number of containers gives us about 16 billion shillings. It also provides jobs, not just for vulnerable groups, including women, men, and youth, but basically it provides jobs for some people. As you saw in the video clip that we saw a couple of minutes ago, there are people who say, look, I trade, and both men and women, all ages as you also saw, I trade this, it's the only way, well, it's the business that I know best, it gives me value, it educates my children, that's how we feed ourselves, and we live off this business. So it's real for some people. It's not just basically an idle thing about claims here and there. You saw real people speaking about it, men, women, different ages, and obviously, I think from marketing Kilifi all the way to other parts, including in Nairobi, right? People speaking about what value the business gives to them. And it's serious in the sense that that's what they live on. So they wake up early in the morning to go and do their job. And their job is providing value to others by trading in consumer goods. So let's go to what the imports look like. In the next slide, yes, the import of used clothes, what we call Mtumba, has grown. From 2007 to 2022, you could see that from 53,000 tons to about 177,000 tons at the end of 2022, the last year for which the data was available as we wrote the report. So it grows quite a bit. And of course, what that shows is that it has grown in tandem with Kenya's income. So as more Kenyans have income, they are also able to buy more clothes. So it's not like somebody is dumping them from there. So as people's incomes grow, the demand grows, they want different objects, and they're buying it. So in other words, they are opening their wallets, Kenyans are opening their wallets to meet the demand that they have for these items. And that's what this figure tells you, all the way from 2007 back there. Of course, the dotted line is the average growth rate over that time. But you can tell it started from about 53,000 and culminated in 2022 at about 177,000 tons. If you look at that, you can tell that there's a big drop in 2020, which was of course the COVID year, because of the same reasons that one of the speakers in the clip mentioned, because of COVID, but also because the government of Kenya at that time imposed certain restrictions. Shipping lines globally were also affected. So the volume that came in was, but as soon as the recovery took place in 2021, you can see it. And then of course in 2022, it was a little lower as well. But on the whole, the demand is stable at about 165 to 177,000 tons. Looking at this again, this is just a summary. Again, over a 15-year period, we are talking about from 2007 to 2022, asking ourselves, how have Kenyan incomes grown? So you've seen the first picture was that the demand was growing, the volumes of trade, and here as well you can see people's incomes growing. Now this is incomes that we've simply taken from the National Bureau of Economic Survey and converted it to what they represent in dollar value, based on that year's exchange rate. So we are not adjusted for inflation, but nevertheless it's telling us that people, so incomes have grown at the same time as incomes have grown at the very same time as the demand has grown. So those two are connected. And in the next picture, we are connecting between changes in Kenya's GDP per capita, in other words, the average income per person, and growth in the tonnage of second-hand clothes. So you see like there's almost a mirror picture, that as people's income grow, of course they demand. Remember, we don't have in this picture what the demand for other clothing items are, but all you see is that as people's incomes grow, obviously the demand for used clothes as well grows with this picture. So it's about basically a correlation coefficient, which is a clever economist way of associating things, 0.95%. So it tells you almost perfect correlation in the sense that as people grow their incomes, they also grow the demand for clothes generally, which is expected. At our income levels, where people have more income, as their income grows, the demand for clothes grows as well. And I think that, and it tells us something that yes, clothing is a normal good, and that normal good is one in which when people have greater incomes, as incomes grow, they have higher. So their demand is dependent as well on how much income is available at their disposal. So let's go down to the next. Now, yes. So if you look carefully at this table, we are trying to say how does incomes in Kenya, as I said, we are talking about incomes in US dollars, but we could do it in Kenya shillings as well. What is the tonnage of used clothes that is coming in at all that income level and Kenya's population at the time? And then ask ourselves, what is the amount per kilogram? I mean, because used clothes are usually brought in by, you can measure it by volume, which is the weight, or you can measure it by the amount of money. Now, because we don't know what the industry sold out to eventually, we are asking ourselves, how many kilograms of used clothes per person is represented by the imports that were brought in? So if you look at that, you can see in 2007, 58,000 tons, 53,000 tons of used clothes were imported. At a population of 35.2 million people, it comes down to about 1.5 kilograms per person of clothing items based on the imports. And then it grew to 2.4, and in 2022, when the data for this study was out, it grew to 3.5%. This is consistent with a global trend line for when people's incomes grow. Remember, Kenya is now a middle income country, became a middle income country after 2016, about 2015, right? It is consistent, it's in the global neighborhood, a little lower, but it's in the global neighborhood of how much people demand clothes when their incomes grow. So there's nothing particularly peculiar about Kenya's demand for clothes, especially if you measure it from this side. It's just consistent with what it's required. So really, it's like, I won't call it a law, but it's expected. As we told you, it's a normal good. When people's incomes grow, the clothes that they buy as part of it grows as well. So that's basically what we're seeing. So we projected that if you look at that, on the basis of that growth over 15 years, we're asking ourselves in 2037, what might be the used clothes in kilograms per capita. And we're finding out that that growth will continue, but it's still actually lower than what the average is for people at Kenya's income level. So I think the story we're trying to tell you here is they claim that there's almost the demand for mitumba in Kenya is a very hot industry. is consistent with the fact that people should demand more or spend more in clothes as their income grows. That's a given. But the idea that Kenya's situation is uncharacteristic or one that is actually out of proportion with what you'd expect is not supported by the data that we see. So you cannot then claim that there's dumping or it's going to cause disproportionate effect on the ability of Kenya to develop manufacturing or industry, in other words, because those are not necessarily connected, as this data tells us. So there's nothing peculiar about the demand levels. Actually, it's below what you'd expect an income level to be. So Kenyans are not necessarily over-demanding. The demand is not excessive for Mtumba in a way that is affecting other incomes or affecting other industries. I think that's the bigger message that we needed to show here. So we go now to what now do we estimate by the income spent on clothing and footwear. So let's start here. Now if you look at this chart or this table, so the first line of course is the years, because we were supposed to estimate. These are our estimates, right? We knew the numbers right up to 2022, but we estimated from 2022, 15 years later, what kind of income levels would exist in Kenya. Based on that growth rate, of course, it's an assumption. And then we ask ourselves, nominal amount, what is the total amount of income that a country spends or people at that income level spend on clothes. And in Kenya, based on the declared surveys, Kenyans spend about 2.5% of their income in clothes. Now that's for both used and the others, about 2.5% of the income. So if you take that income, it represents $26 equivalent, which is about 3,000. Then in 2015 it was about $41, and of course in 2022 it was $56. Our expectation is in 2037, if Kenya's income continues to grow at the dollar level as it was growing in that time period, in the 15, at the same pace as the 15 years here, Kenyans will be spending about $123 per person on clothes, not on jewelry, which is basically $123 in 2037. Now, countries that have middle income status, proper middle income status, right? Remember, Kenya is a lower middle income, would be spending 136, because countries that have an income level of about $6,000 and above, which is middle income status, usually spend about 4% of the household income per person on buying clothes. So it will tell us that at 2037, it will be $123 per person in Kenya, while a real middle income state, a real middle income country would be about 186 per person. So there's nothing that's peculiar about here. In fact, it's telling us that Kenyans are very conservative, still a bit conservative based on the income levels on what they spend. So we have to get to about proper middle income status to match the 3.8%. I hope the story is clear. That in Kenya's case, income per capita, income spent on clothing is about 1.5. Remember, that's for all. This is not for Mtumba. Spent on all clothes, of which of course Mtumba will be subset. And a middle income status, which is Kenya's ambition for Vision 2030, right, would mean that we'd be spending about 3.8% per person. In our estimation, if you take it at 2.5, Kenyans would be spending about $123 per person. It's about just $10 per month per person on clothes at an income level of about $5,000, which has not been reached if it continues in that case. So I think that's an essential thing. So that expenditure per person is not expenditure on Mtumba alone, it will be total expenditure on clothes, of which of course Mtumba will be 1%. So in the next slide, we went to the due data and asked ourselves, what's household spending on new and used clothes in Kenya? Remember, the main argument for our second question, which should be, is it true that expenditure on Mtumba is preventing the development of local industry that manufactures new clothes which might be exported and all that? And one of the ways to determine that is to ask ourselves by going into the household who puts on clothes. It's people. Where do they live? In houses. So a survey was conducted. The survey is a little old. Yes, a new one is coming up. But if you ask yourself, what kind of household? So on the gray chart, I mean on your left, the first chart on your left, it's complicated, but we are trying to find out. Now, when this study was conducted in 2015-16, it asked people, how much did you spend on new clothes by households, all income households in Kenya? And it presented an example of households in Kenya. And we found out that for new purchases, the median purchase, in other words, for new clothes, the median purchase per month, in terms of the amount of money that's spent on clothes for a household, was about 450 shillings. In other words, half of Kenyan households bought new clothes of 450 shillings or less. You get it? And another half bought 400. So 450 is basically what divides them. Is like the middle line, 450 or less, and that. That's for households. On the other side, for second-hand clothes, for second-hand clothes, sorry, the mean, yes, so 450 or less, but the average was about 780, which is about 800 shillings. So many more people, most people spend 450 or less, but there are people who spend much, much higher, and the average is that. Now, for the second-hand purchases, as you can tell, the 50% of the households spend 280. So in other words, what this tells you that if you compare the median, where 50% of the people are, new clothes are almost close to two times what people spend on new. You guys get it? And that's essential for the argument, the displacement argument, that people are spending close to two times as much for new clothes. It is odd logic to therefore claim that the existence of Mitumba is preventing people from buying new ones when they're already buying almost 2 times as much for new clothes, regardless of the fact that Mitumba exists. So that argument just doesn't work. In fact, what we say this argument tells you is that Kenyans have choices. You know what to go to for what. When you want new stuff, you go to new stuff. And when you want other things that give you a different style or a different cost advantage, you go for that. That's so important because the argument cannot be that it is either one or the other. Kenyan households, here represented by 74,000 households, tell you that people choose between one and the other depending on what they're looking for. And at the same time, they're also spending, depending on what they're looking for. Averages are completely different. It's an important point to make. So the average for the bean clothes is 780, while the average for the second-hand purchases is about 409. So that displacement argument does not exist in the data, even if it is strongly embedded in some people's minds. So in our next, we'll be finishing a bit, but let me go down to our next. Yes. So having taken that, remember these are real money that Kenyans spend. We didn't conduct the survey was conducted by the Kenyan Bureau of Statistics. So none of the data that we cite here is our own, it's data that is in existence in government archives. So we found out that, okay, so it's important to say that people purchase, but you want to find out what is the price range that they purchase. And you can tell here that new purchases for clothes that are more than 1,000 shillings, that are less than, used purchases for clothes that are 1,000 shillings or less, new purchases were 74.5% of households purchased in that same year that we're talking about, 2016. On a monthly basis, 74.5% of them chose clothes that 1,000 shillings or less, right? For new purchases. And of course, that means that the reverse, 25% of cases who are buying clothes that are more than 1,000 per month. This is a monthly purchase. On the other side, for used purchases, 91.5% of people who were buying used or Mitumba were paying 1,000 shillings or less. So the first thing this tells you is that Mitumba represents certain value for people. And it's attractive to people who want to spend at that income level. It's an extremely important point, because then that means that whether you're having bans, whether you're having reductions, and remember this is after, right? The taxes have been placed on them as well, which represents that price point. So it's telling you that on a price competitiveness basis, it looks like Mitumba Clothes presents two Kenyans who purchased here, right? A very competitive option for getting what they demand. This is a very, very important point. So it's telling you that yes, and the first thing that you conclude as an economist is that these two things represent different streams. One is not a replacement for the other. It is not a replacement for the other. And I think the data from the Mitumba Association itself shows that when Kenyans buy certain things, they know what it is they're buying. They're not buying things that are necessarily available in the shops today for them. So they're not replacing one with the other. They're just stretching their money to be able to give them what is available at what price points. So I'll just repeat this before we close this chapter. One, if you split the money arbitrarily by asking, fine, people are spending money on clothes, you saw what the average is, but you're asking yourself, where do they spend what money? And you realize that when they're buying new purchases of 1,000 shillings and below, those who are buying new purchases, 74% of the buyers, 75% of the buyers are buying, for new clothes are buying clothes at 1,000 shillings and below. For used purchases from Mitumba, most of those who are buying in that year were paying 1,000 shillings or less, or 91%. That's a huge budget. So it's telling you first that Kenyans shop competitively, at least here, and then secondly, when they're shopping, they know which side to spend what amount of money on. It is highly likely, and it's unlikely therefore that these are necessarily direct competitors for each other, so that pushing out one will necessarily lead to an extension of the other. So that's the price side. And so what it's telling us here is that second-hand clothes are not direct competitors for domestic manufactured new clothes in Kenya, but rather that the Mitumba industry simply supplements the locally manufactured apparel rather than being a substitute for it. And that new clothing and footwear is purchased across the income spectrum. Yes, across income spectrums. All households have those choices, and they can spend, they know what to buy when they're looking for the new clothes, whether it's from Kenya, or whether it's imported, or whether it is Mitumba. So I think Kenyan households are hybrid. They buy one part from the other, and they buy. So there's no such thing as households that buy only new. Most households don't show the characteristics of only buying new or buying in Mitumba. They mix and match depending on what the demand is, and that tells you that those two streams are necessarily different. But there's an awareness of where you get what when you want to spend your money. So it's clear that as income rise, the consumption of second-hand clothes in the share of all expenditure will decrease, even if, of course, the volume might increase on a per capita basis, but the value of that, of course, will be higher because people have greater incomes to spend. We were then asked to say, okay, what's the possibility of the coexistence? Why? Because we come to the point about, is coexistence possible? I think coexistence is the way, in our view, because we've shown that we are buying, people are making choices and they're buying different things at different price points, but also that Kenyans show here that you try to buy competitively. And we think that in the next 15 years, depending on what choices Kenyan government takes, will determine the future of the sector between 2023, when we're talking about this, and that. So here is 4 possible scenarios where there's a possibility of coexistence. And the coexistence between these industries will depend on 2 things. 1, the kind of policy that government of Kenya takes, and 2, the level of demand that Kenyans have for clothes. So whether government decides to continue to try to limit or to allow the markets to work, to compete where the competition is, or to supplement each other according to the household. And our view is the government should adopt the perspective of the consumer, not the perspective of producers, which is you have to stop mitumba for us to continue more budget. It's the consumers whose interest should be brought here. Let the other guys compete. So we are here with 4 possible scenarios or 4 possible pictures. So the first one basically is where government policies are negative, but demand continues to be high, which is the first one on your left, right? Number 1. So whether they can coexist, it's ambiguous. The number of jobs that is created will drop. Variety in clothing, as we've seen variety, because people buy new things here and they buy the others, will also drop. It's unlikely that local production will necessarily rise, because we've shown that it's not necessarily the same. Government revenues, of course, will be affected because you won't have timber volumes. And it's ambiguous whether timber volumes will be lower or higher. Part of the reason is we have extremely open borders as well, and that demand is, as you can tell, a decent level of demand, so it's unclear to us what will happen. So that would be an ambiguous thing in terms of whether the volumes will fall or not. On the other side, number 2, where government has positive policies. As we say, positive policies means looking at it from the perspective of the consumers. They're the ones who are spending their money, earning money, and going to a market or to a specific shop to buy stuff. And then market demand remains high. So coexistence is possible. Coexistence would be a good thing. In other words, the existence of Mutumba will not necessarily affect Kenya's ability to make textiles locally and export it. It's not necessarily dependent on what Mutumba policy is. Jobs will rise, as you can see, jobs directly, indirectly. The variety of clothes that's available on the consumer, focus for the consumer to buy will be up. Local production will, because obviously growth in the economy affects. And at the same time, you know that demand for clothes depends on incomes, and even those who trade in Mutumba know when to go for new clothes, because those varieties, those options are not always available for everything. And Mutumba volumes certainly will go up as well. Then you come to the third place, which is basically negative government policies and demand falls for Mutumba. So coexistence is not necessary. There's nothing to say about that. Jobs will reduce on the Mutumba side. Variety, of course, will also reduce, because definitely there's low demand. Production will reduce, government won't have revenue, and of course Mutumba volume will reduce. Remember, it will reduce because it's driven by government, public, the consumers, right? So if consumers don't want to, nobody will import and pay because of consumers. They're adopting the perspective of the consumer about what they want. Why? Because it's shown that they're the ones who are actually paying their 1,000 shillings or more to buy one item or the other, both from the new shops, from the shops, whether it's new or whether it's second-hand material. And the fourth one is where there's positive government perspectives, policies, and then demand, market demand for Mutumba falls. So coexistence will be the same as what we have here. Jobs will reduce because there's no demand. Variety will reduce as well, but nobody will miss that because variety is in the perspective of the consumer. Local production probably will remain the same. Government revenue probably the same as well. And obviously, consumer volumes definitely will reduce or be stagnant on account of the fact that because there's no demand, there's no new demand, and demand doesn't grow. So this picture is just basically a representation and a thought experiment around what kind of options are available to government. I think that number 2 is best, to let consumer choices lead what the policies the government pursues at. And yet, it actually is also coincidentally the one that also gives government most of the positives. Coexistence is possible, jobs will rise definitely, variety will be available to the consumer, local production will rise because demand will also be rising, revenue will rise, and the volume will also rise as well. So that's basically our conclusion. Now we try here in the next to project market size and per capita use of used clothes, and we're asking ourselves, this is based on growth. And as we told you, that the source of demand from Mutumba in Kenya is Kenyans' incomes. Because it's an income that creates the demand that makes a trader go to Mombasa, import a container, and pay $15,000, is it $14,000 upfront before they even sell it, right? That risk that the entrepreneur is taking is because they know there's demand up here that will be able to serve and will allow me to meet my costs. So here we're talking about what happens if incomes grow. So these are scenarios about if incomes grow. So growth in used clothes tonnage, basically we're assuming a growth rate of, in incomes, national income growth. And then, of course, the elasticity or annual growth rate of incomes. So basically we're trying to say, if incomes grow by a certain amount, how much does that amount lead to concomitant demand, or rather, to consequent demand on used clothes as well. And so you can see here that when it grows highest, when income grows high, when income growth occurs, the highest growth rate at 8% would lead to the highest elasticity, which is also the demand for used clothing. Scenario 4, which is 1%, will also lead to the lowest demand. So what here it's telling us is, look, the choices we have to make is, if you're interested in people's welfare, which is the most important purpose of government, national policies should lead to income growth, right? National policies will lead to income growth. Inevitably, by virtue of the fact that Kenyans have more money, that will lead to the demand for clothes, and obviously also for used and mitumba clothes as well. So that's it. So the problem to solve in Kenya today is one of people's income growth, and let the industry, be it mitumba or the other, fulfill the demands of Kenyans based on what incomes grow. We shouldn't start with the idea that we're interested in the supplier side, which is those supplies must be domestic. We should ask ourselves, what's the best outcome that we receive when people's incomes grow? Why? Because it's the consumer who matters the most here. So here is, what it's just telling us basically, the size of Kenya's clothing sector, which comprises both children and new clothes, whether they're demand from outside or whether it's domestic demand itself, depends on the incomes that Kenyans will receive, not on whether you squash the demand or the input of consumer on its own. It's not going to have much of a difference, except to completely destabilize and affect the 2 million people whose incomes right now are directly from it. I'll finish now. It takes a little longer. Let me finish because I've taken too much time. Anyway, so the last, so the way forward for us is basically that, the way forward for us is three things. Is that a liberalized economy which allows for the consumer, remember we're talking about the consumer's focus, the households, who spend the money that they've received or that they've earned to go and purchase one item or the other. So one of them is an open market, the most open ones, policy that allows a liberalized market for the demand to be met, will safeguard the interests of both sectors, whether it's domestic production, and at the same time, of course, the 2 million or so people who right now, 1.8 million or so people who right now trade directly or indirectly on their income. So that's the first one. The second basically is opening up that market and creating a fair ground, creates the fair competition and expands consumer choice. I think Kenya's policy on clothing and industry should be based on what's best for the consumer. The third is that open policy will also strengthen the growth and sustainability of Kenya's apparel industry overall. So our recommendations, of course, is for government to implement a harmonized set of import regulations, I think stable import regulations, whether it's regarding the inflow of second-hand clothing and raw materials for Kenya's textile industry. I think that's important. Government ought not to think about squashing one industry, but to think about how do we expand and make the regulations and make Kenya a competitive place for one, manufacture of clothes, and two, the trade in clothes as well. And of course, also there's a place to enforce eco-friendly practices in both sectors, whether it's those that are made domestically or whether those that are imported and traded within the country. So with those, I thank you very much for listening to me, and I hope you can ask some questions.
Well done, Kwame. He deserves a better clap. But because he's an economist, I'm sure we need to give a very economical clap that fits into their graphs, their tables, their trends. So we'll just give him one hearty clap that goes back and we'll conclude. this is an opportunity to show that you used to listen to class. So it's just one hearty clap. So when I say go, it's one hearty clap. If you do two, you pay our bills today. Okay, one hearty clap. Hey, unaogopa budget. Thank you very much, Kwame, and the team from the Institute of Economic Affairs in the region. I think that was a very insightful presentation, and thank you also for giving us the insights before we even launched the report. I'm sure everybody in the room has quite a number of questions, and I'm sure we will have a session where we can just go through that. But I think as we prepare for the next session, I picked something very interesting, the correlation between income, economic income for individuals, and the demand for clothes. For a number of years, recent years, I started panicking. I thought we were a SAPE country, because anytime I try and catch up with fashion, it moves to another level. But now I see the relationship. I think we're getting some increased income, because 2 years ago I went and ensured that all my pants were fitting. Then I wake up in 2025, in 2024, and I discover we are again going to bell-bottomed pants. I don't know what I should do, because I lost that fabric. But we'll deal with that. So I'll shortly invite our chair, who's Apostle Teresia Wairimu Njenga. She's the chair of the Mitumba Consortium Association of Kenya. I think she had waved earlier on today. But she's equally the founder of the Synagogue of Hope Church and Ministry in Nairobi. So she's been in the business for more than 2 decades. Anybody who was born in the last 2 decades, so she was in the business by then. But interesting enough, and maybe one day she'll tell us this story if we have time. She started this business with 3,000 shillings. I don't know what it will take to get into that business now. But currently, together with her husband, they've grown the business to multi-levels, and she imports from Canada, US, Europe, and sometimes China. So that definitely is recorded growth. And congratulations, our chair. So karibu sana, chair. And you'll equally invite our guest who has another engagement, so she would like to really give her remarks. And I think we need those remarks, because I think every other slide Kwame touched on, he kept on mentioning policy, and anytime you mention policy in a democratic country, you know it means legislative action in it. So, karibu sana, Apostle.
Good morning, everybody. Bwana Yesu asifiwe. Yeah, thank you so much for this opportunity. I know I'll be giving my speech shortly, but allow me to invite my sister, our guest today, Honorable Catherine Wabilianga, because she has another engagement to give her speech and to speak to us this morning, and we allow her to leave. Let's put our hands together. Asante, karibu.
Asante sana. Thank you very much, Sister Teresia. Good morning, group. Good morning, everybody. Good morning. Thank you. I think I'm excited to be here today. I hadn't planned, but I just found myself being one of you. My name is Catherine. My name is Catherine Wambilianga. Catherine is a teacher to begin with, and I'm also a legislator. I am the Member of Parliament of Bungoma County, what we call Women Representative. I am doing my second term in Parliament. But this morning I found myself in a very interesting space, a space where I began from. I just give a short story, because when I talk about Mitumba, I think I get excited because it is where I began from, and it's what has made me to be what I am. So feel encouraged when you're in this room. I've seen quite a number of elite faces, people who have done Mitumba, and it has grown them to levels. I am a testimony, and a really living testimony to that. When I was a teacher way back, even before I became a teacher when I was in college, I got interested in selling Mitumba. But that was a very low scale. Teresa, you began with 3,000. I think I was doing with 200, 300 while in college. But I got interested because of the taste and the fashion that I could get out of Mutumba. So when I graduated and finally became a teacher, I was a classroom teacher way back in my county, I advanced now. I found out that people, especially teachers, needed Mutumba. And they were interested in something that is very interesting. I was a fashion designer, mostly in houses, because I used to teach home science. So I could sell something called household. That time you could go and pick Mutumba, but now pick in terms of camera. I don't know whether it's still there. Camera. We used to do something called camera. So I did camera for some few years, then I realized, I can take a loan and do Mutumba at a higher scale. I took a loan, ventured in, with about 400,000. But the outcome was immense. That's how I even bought my first car as a classroom teacher after teaching for just like 4.5 years. So I continued, and it inspired me even now to get to a bigger space. I could walk around the whole country, the whole county that time, move to primary schools, secondary schools, get teachers, get my colleagues, and they could tell me they're interested in my stuff. So I started doing bells now, going to Mombasa doing bells. At that time, I distributed them all over in the entire county in staff rooms. That is how I got my network. So with the networks, I got on. My territory, expanded immensely. So by the time teacher politics came, I decided to venture. I was calling myself Mama Mutumba, lakini nilikuwa naitwa Mwalimu Mutumba. So Mwalimu Mutumba ni kaingia kwa siasa. That time it was Kupet, I'm a high school teacher. So when I just tried like this, from my networks, I got elected. I was the first treasurer of Kupet in this country. And as we speak, I rose, again through Mutumba. I rose now, I'm the national treasurer, not national treasurer, national secretary general of Kupet, Kenya, as we speak. But alongside that, I also had to expand again. Just using Mutumba, and the Mutumba name, the tag grew with me. When national politics came, now there was the seat of women rep. I decided, let me use my tag again and see if I can rise up. With my same tag, I went around the whole county. Madam Mutumba walikuwa wananiita mwalimu wa Mutumba. Do you know, I removed a doctor from the seat to become the woman rep from this Mutumba business. And that is my story about Mutumba. I always feel elated. Whenever I go, I feel excited. I dress in Mutumba and nobody can realize it's Mutumba. But today, I have gone a lot higher, having listened to Daktari here. Your story, is it Kwame?
Yes.
It is interesting how Mutumba has transformed this country. As a legislator, I feel elated, and I want to promise this room that even as I walk out, we are going to discuss about the budget. I'm in one of those committees that is going to approve the budget ahead of the 2024, 2025, and you know what we normally do in June. So as they talk about the budget and the taxes, believe you me, I'll be one of the advocates who will advocate that Mutumba taxes go down. Because I know what Mutumba has done to our people, how it has saved several households in this country, and where we are destined as a country. We actually need a reprieve on taxes, especially on our Mutumba business. I want to end my story there because I have to rush somewhere. Thank you so much, Teresia, for inviting me. And Jackie, I know you're in the room. Thank you so much for being the link person to bring me to this exciting forum. I wish and hope to engage more with you guys in future. Now that we have contacts, next time you are here, you are anywhere else, invite me. I want to know more, and I also want to continue still venturing in this business. Asanteni sana na Mungu akawabariki.
Thank you very much, Madam Honorable. You know, to be great, you need to associate with greatness. So before you leave, I just want to let you know that You're my neighbor in the Sarit center of Western Province. A very beautiful town. Listen, there's a Sarit center. Where? A very beautiful town called Webuye. So if you know the history of that town, you'll know why we call it the Sarit center of Western Province. Thank you very much, and we really look forward to the intervention at a policy level. I'm sure the team in the room will be very glad and would like to share with you. So without much ado, allow me to introduce a gentleman who's the CEO and regional coordinator of the East African Chamber of Commerce, Industry and Agriculture. And by the fact that I'm mentioning that, then it shows that our business goes beyond the borders of this country. He's been spearheading a lot of PPP agenda in the region, which is public and private partnership agenda in the region. Quite key in promoting the regional agenda, and as he walks to the stage, he's got quite a bio, but I'm sure he'll speak more about it. Mr. Charles Kahudu, karibu sana.
Hello, good morning. Kwame, how have you been for ages? Long time since I saw you last. My name is Charles Kahodo, as you are told. I work for East Africa Chamber of Commerce, Industry and Agriculture. When you hear the last word, industry, it means, of course, cotton and the textile industry, and of course, mitumba associated with it, definitely has a role to play there. I also work for the Africa Business Council, which is an African Union private sector body, whose agenda, in fact, is articulate policy, as you have just said, on the private sector needs to the African Union Commission. So we have an observer seat there, and when the private sector in Africa has a problem or challenges, and they need intervention from the political heads level, that's our heads of state who regularly meet in Addis Ababa, we help out. I'm one of the vice presidents. We are about 4 vice presidents representing regions. And one of the things actually we deal with is the challenges that in fact come about to our local manufacturers. And because of what in fact our African agenda is. Agenda 2063 encompasses very many things. Among them is in fact to encourage continental manufacturing and value addition, so that Africa can be able to feed itself, to clothe itself, to add value to our minerals before we can re-export them outside. And more importantly, is to be able to trade more with ourselves. Kenya to trade more with the DRC or Uganda or South Africa or West Africa than otherwise we do. We have become a bit of a trading nation as a country, and of course that does not augur well for the continent. Africa is very resource rich. We all know that. We may not be having enough cotton to grow, so that we have to complement what we need to wear from outside. But that is not the agenda of our heads of state. They need to see Africa producing what it will otherwise be needing. Currently, we trade about 15% among ourselves, because not many countries will trade or will come to Kenya and say, oh, you are manufacturing this, or you are producing this, whether it's agricultural or a processed good, and we need to buy it. Instead, we look towards China, India, Europe, and so on. That is actually will not be an agenda to realize the 2063, the transformative agenda that we need to transform the continent. That cannot happen. And even in Kenya, 2030 agenda actually discounts that as well. So we really need to do quite a few things to be able to completely become self-sustaining. You can see I'm trying to be very careful not to be able to discount the mitumba industry, because I know we cannot do that. For the time being, we must see ways and means how we can see that the two products, second-hand clothing and the newly manufactured garments work together, coexist with each other until such a time that Africa, I'm not talking about Kenya, I'm talking about Africa. And by extension, I'm talking about East Africa. In fact, our heads of state in the East Africa community have already pronounced themselves on that they want the continent, the region rather, to be able to add more value addition by encouraging regional value chains where we have excess cotton production like Tanzania and Uganda, so that countries which are cotton deficient like Kenya and others, of course, there are the others in the region like Somalia now, can be able to get that, and they produce some of the material they need to make garments right here in Kenya. By that does not mean that they have said we throw away mitumba, because we cannot. Kenya, as I have said, it is deficient in what we call new clothing. And for that reason, if you actually follow through what Kenya looked at and us in 1970s, 1980s, we were totally self-sufficient in these garments. A few of you may not know, there was a company called Kikomi in Kisumu that was processing raw cotton, turning it into yarn, eventually into a fabric and a good garment, at the end. We had Letio Jija in Uganda. We had Kenya Titex Mills in Thika, Mountex in Nanyuki, Rivertex in Eldoret. So we were self-sufficient in some of these things. But somewhere in the 80s, something went wrong. Well, that is what development is all about. You are able to do something good one time and you give yourself credit for it. Other times, of course, you have challenges, and those challenges come about with things like now, completely destruction of the cotton industry and the textile industry by extension. And this is the genesis of actually mitumba through our second president, President Moi. But you cannot keep on hammering those points home. You look into the future. And I remember, in fact, I was here in Arusha. I stay in Arusha, by the way. But I remember a couple of weeks ago, 2 or 3 weeks ago, our new Cabinet Secretary for Investment, Trade and Industry, Honorable Kinyui, was being interviewed. I think I don't know whether it's Jeff Koinange. But he talked something about this particular industry, how we cannot afford to just ignore it, mitumba. We cannot afford to ignore it. But then we have to cast our eyes a little bit ahead so that we know we have another industry, another baby called the textile sector, which we have an obligation to pick up and in fact move it along as we are actually consuming the second-hand clothing. And we are also adding value to them, because you can add value to second-hand clothing by just, as the comment said, sorting out what has been brought. Some of it may have actually passed in and it's not so good. You sort it out, you clean it up, you do a few other things, you repackage it, and you can sell it out again. So that is value addition that we actually encourage. And that can coexist early to date into the future with the new clothing. That is the kind of faith we have that at one point in the coming years, maybe 35 years, there were 37 over 5, which Kwame has just talked about, we might see ourselves becoming, once again, people who can have pride and have value in our new clothing. And they can be coexisting, a new suit that you have actually bought. It will not be expensive, it will be cheaper, and it can coexist with clothing, second-hand clothing. That is what I can say we should be aspiring for. But we cannot say that textile industry is done, finished and done with, and we have no role with it. We do have a role with it. Some of the times that we have engaged with the new clothing manufacturers, both in Athi River here in the industry area and so on and so forth, they have actually accepted that maybe the approach they used was wrong. They had not approached the market the way they should approach it. Perhaps they should see how to coexist with those people who are bringing new clothing, almost near being new suits. And someone like myself say, okay, I'll buy that one because it is a bit cheaper and it is quality garment, manufactured somewhere in America, Europe, and I am not going to go into the industrial area to buy the suit he is actually manufacturing. But that now is becoming a thing of the past. In other words, what I'm trying to encourage is that there is a way that the two sectors, the way they are, can coexist. You will still continue making incomes with the second-hand clothing, and the manufacturer in the industrial area continues to improve on his quality production, the reduction in prices, and you find that you can, in fact, be able to coexist with each other for some time. I don't know for how long, because even the Kwame has actually projected about 35 or 7 years. But that could be going a little bit further along to achieving the objective of Vision 2030, of which actually local value addition, local production is one of the key goals in our Pillar 2 economic, which brings about manufacturing. And it is also the goal for the African Union Agenda 2063. Because clearly they have told us they want us to add value to all the continent's natural resources. The immense natural resources we have in minerals, in cotton, in agriculture, and to encourage what we call made in Africa production. In other words, goods that have a label saying this is made in Africa. You see? And you can't do that with the second-hand clothing. You know, that is, of course, a challenge. I'm not saying that you can't sell it. I'm just saying it cannot have the value adding of a made in Africa product. And that is, and I'm telling you, that is a goal of our colleagues at the African Union, our heads of state, who mandated that we trade more with ourselves instead of thinking that we are going to collect everything from China or India or Europe. We trade more, adding value to what we have, encouraging regional value chains, and I have said the best example for a regional value chain is cotton. Uganda has excess of it, Tanzania has excess of it, Kenya has the capacity to actually turn all these local raw cotton into an item like this one and send it back to Uganda and Tanzania. Again, that is having more money into your pockets, together with what you have already as second-hand clothing. I'm not going to talk much, and I said I didn't want to challenge any report that is here. I just want to say that we have enough, if we can think of producing and adding value, quote, local raw materials that is available here, adding more skills to ourselves, to our youth and women, so that they are able to produce it, and in the process get the old second-hand clothing that has come, also transformed a little bit, so that when you are selling these, you are selling them as a little bit more sorted, and you can claim to have added a little bit of value to them, and over time we shall be able to get to where we need to get as a continent, that we are self-sufficient. We trade more, we trade only 13% with ourselves, 13 to 15%. Of course, the rest of the trade with the world is in China, Europe, India, and other places. That is not encouraging to our heads of state or our political leaders. That is not where they want to take the countries, not only Kenya. In the region, we want to go a different route. I told you they are pronouncing themselves that we need to change our game, to up it, so that whereas they have never ever pronounced themselves that they want to ban mitumba, they want to see that something else is happening to encourage the cotton that we had before, and even as we encourage the cotton that we had before, of course, we cannot also think of abandoning the labor that is employed in this particular sector. It's an important sector. Of course, crustaceans, you have heard from Honorable Catherine here. She values what she has done and where she is because of that. We will continue to do that, but we should not lose sight that we have another sector to take care of. I'm very happy because the Madam Chair of the Mitumba Consortium Association of Kenya has also pronounced herself that they will try to see how they can concurrently work towards helping revive our cotton industry, which was not, it was totally, collapsed over the years. So that even as we bring in the old Mitumba and transform them a little bit, we can also look at that sector, which again employs more Kenyans, farmers, and so on and so forth. And then when you come to the processing side of it, you have the spinners, you have garment manufacturers, and finally, the people who can sell it to us, who are, consumers, who is actually yourselves also. In a recent actually discussion we had with Kenya Association of Manufacturers and the Mitumba Consortium Association of Kenya. In fact, we got that agreement from the manufacturers that they are ready to work with the MCAK membership and to use them as a conduit for selling the new clothes they are manufacturing in that area. Because what we looked at was that they actually are looking at the problem in a different way. It is the market they lack and not actually having competition from the second-hand clothing that come in. And when they come in quality goods, not only are they actually adding a little bit of value by sorting and so on and so forth, and perhaps even packaging them so that you can resell, they're also giving government revenue, which is important. So I gave a general statement, as I told you, Kwame. I will not come here to challenge anything, but I say we have also to take into account what needs to be done for the country, because cotton industry is important for every one of us, even as we try to aspire to become smart and make money. We still need cotton that can feed a farmer and can feed everybody else in the value chain. I think I'll leave it there. But I want to congratulate you. I think you do good work, as always. That's a good report, and I hope its launch would mean something to the team that is here, and also to the chairperson, who actually, I know her belief about some of these things. Okay, thank you very much. Thank you, sir.
Thank you very much, Mr. Kahutu. I think we need to appreciate that he was speaking on behalf of the 8 member countries of East Africa, and he really had to represent those countries. So maybe we should give him 8 hearty claps. So we are moving from the economic ones, which was just ones, and now we'll just do 8 of them. So to the count of 1, we will start 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8, 9, which is the 9th country in the East African community. So in the interest of time, we'll then invite a gentleman who's a very accomplished researcher. He's a public policy expert with over 16 years of experience accumulated in the public sector in Kenya. He's had both local and international assignments with interest in the trade policy, trade finance, corporate finance, and financial risk management. He's quite published. He has published over 13 peer-reviewed journal articles, has a book chapter with several publications on trade-related policy issues, and has made various presentations at different international research conferences. And last but not least, he holds a PhD in business administration. I held this for last because anytime you mentioned about having completed a course or completed studies, my late father used to ask me, where is your PhD? Because that's the only time he can allow you to say you finished school. So
I'm not sure if Dr. John Karanja has finished school, but Dr. John Karanja, karibu sana. We'll try and do it for one country, so 5 minutes. Thank you.
Thank you very much, and good morning. Good morning. My name is Dr. John Karanja. I'm Acting Director at the Kenya Institute for Public Policy, Research and Analysis, skipper. I want to thank MSK for inviting us to this event, and even to really thank you for putting together the report which you'll be launching today. Allow me to say that KIPRA is a state corporation under the Ministry of National Treasury, Economic Planning, and in particular the State Department of Economic Planning. We are 27 years since our establishment, and we were established by the government with a specific mandate, and that is to provide quality public policy advice to the government of Kenya, to the private sector, and other stakeholders. And we do this by conducting objective policy research and policy analysis, and also through capacity building, so that we contribute to the achievement of the national long-term development goals, and also to positively influence the decision-making process in this country. Having said that, and being the only government think tank in this country, we've been able to undertake some work on how we can be able to rejuvenate the local manufacturing industries in the context of circular economy, the entire second-hand economy. And we have been able to advise the government, and we continue doing so, on how to rejuvenate our local manufacturing industries, as it's outlined in the better plan and also the medium-term platform. Therefore, we are very happy when we see this sector also coming up to generate some evidence which can also be used to inform public policy, and that is a good step forward. Let me say, as an institute, we will continue working with our prayers, including MCK, to be able to look at the issues that need to be addressed through policy, and also to work together as a country. And remember, we have a plan that we need to achieve, to implement the bottom up. We have a number of jobs we need to produce annually, and we also need to ensure that the value chains across the sector for textiles and apparel are also working. I want to stop there, but congratulate MSK and the team that put together the report. As an institute, you are going to look at the report, and we shall be able to give our feedback and see what we may be doing forward. We can work together as we advise the government. Thank you very much. Congratulations.
Thank you so much, Daktari. Brief and very specific to the point. I think a lot of this information has already gone to the journals, and it will go to more journals. So when he gets such sessions, he is very succinct with his delivery. Once again, thank you. And because of that, I think he deserves a better clap. Kwame, please make it as brief as his speech. So not the rainy one, but just one big hearty clap. Let's go. Good. Thank you very much. I will shortly invite my colleagues, Martin, if we can just get everything on board as we bring in Kwame. No, just before we bring in Kwame, Reverend, welcome back. Sorry, I thought you had gone through the speech, my apologies. Welcome back, give us your speech. But in the meantime, the team from MCAK, please help us put together what we shall be launching shortly. Thank you.
Good afternoon, team.
Good afternoon.
Bwana Yesu asifiwe. Allow me to get my speech. Yeah. Ladies and gentlemen, distinguished guests, policy makers, researchers, our vibrant Mitumba community, textile sector representatives and members of the press, good morning. It is my absolute pleasure to welcome you to this pivotal moment for Kenya apparel and footwear industry. It is pivotal moment because Kenya mitumba sector has recently come under threat. There is a strong lobby from individuals who seek to discredit mitumba and paint it as threat to Kenya development. Ladies and gentlemen, the debate we are hearing play out in the media is not truly about our beloved second-hand clothing. It is about influence, access, and the future of our markets. That is why we must stand together to promote mitumba sector and educate the public and politicians on the true value of mitumba. I am once again pleased to be joined by my colleagues from the Mitumba Consortium Association of Kenya, the representatives body of Kenyans earning their livelihoods from the trade of second-hand clothes and footwear in the country. Fellow traders, naomba mupungie watu mikono. Yeah, thank you so much. I am honored to represent you, my fellow traders, my colleagues from the mitumba sector, the voice of millions of Kenyans whose livelihoods depend on this dynamic trade that is under vicious attack. It is both an honor and privilege to stand before you today as we launch this study. This study is a future look at the apparel and footwear industry in Kenya 2022 to 2037, and it offers a comprehensive analysis of our industry and provides a roadmap for its sustainable growth. I would like to acknowledge the priceless contribution of Mr. Kwame Owino here. Thank you so much, sir, whose extensive research and insights have been instrumental in shaping this report. Mr. Kwame has already presented a detailed finding of the report, and I encourage you all to engage with the data and analysis he has shared in the report that will be given to you after this. Today, we are not here to defend mitumba. We are here to celebrate its role in Kenya's economy and to prove that it can coexist with local manufacturing to create jobs, drive growth, and keep Kenya fashionably ahead. We are here to talk about livelihoods, innovation, and the future of Mama Mboga, the young entrepreneur represented in Gikomba, and the factory worker representative in Thika at the textile mill. I just want to take a moment to reflect on what we hope to see for the future of mitumba and local manufacturing in Kenya. I wish to highlight the broader vision that this report captures, a vision where mitumba sector and local textile manufacturing coexist, each playing a crucial role in meeting the diverse needs of the Kenyan consumers. But as we look to the future, it is now clear that we need strong policies and support from the government to ensure that both mitumba and local textile manufacturing continue to thrive. This is where I believe we can take important steps forward. Our aspirations extend beyond Kenya's borders. As I have observed during my travels across East Africa and other parts of the continent, the potential for regional collaboration is immense. We have great opportunities to get into partnership and share best practices. We have rare opportunity to create a robust and resilient apparel industry that benefits all Kenyans. Kenya mitumba sector, with its vast informal network and entrepreneurial spirit, could serve as a model for other nations. Instead of wishing one way, embracing both second-hand and locally produced apparel could promote economic inclusion, job creation, and sustainable development across the country. In that regard, there is need for a policy framework that balances and supports both mitumba and roko production. This includes harmonizing import standards that enables fair trade and quality, while also offering incentives to encourage the growth of local textile manufacturing. Whether through tax reliefs, skills development program, or access to modern technology, we can then see mitumba and roko production thrive together. But while Kenya is capable of doing this on its own, the East African region as a whole needs to come together to advocate for policies that support both mitumba and roko manufacturing. I believe we can create a model for cooperation that benefits all East African neighbors. This could be achieved through sharing best practices, setting common standards, and collaborating on other policies. So, as Kenya works toward Visions 2030 and the African Union Agenda 2063, there is immense potential for us to champion this dual approach and advocate for a stronger, more sustainable apparel industry in Kenya and East Africa. Looking ahead, we envision a future where government policies categorize job creation, environmental sustainability, and affordable clothing for every Kenyan. We also envision a future where Kenya and the East African region lead the way in sustainable fashion, providing jobs and opportunities for youth and women alike, while contributing to global sustainability goals. It is my hope that through collaboration, innovation, and strong accommodative policy support, we can create a resilient and sustainable apparel industry that benefits everyone. As we delve into the findings of this report, let us remember that the mitumba sector is more than just a market for second-hand clothes. It is a dynamic and vital part of our economy, offering affordable clothing, creating jobs, and contributing to government revenue. In conclusion, I urge all stakeholders to collaborate in creating an enabling environment where both mitumba and roko manufacturing flourish. Together, let us build an apparel industry that is inclusive, sustainable, and reflective on our shared aspirations. Thank you very much. Can we invite Mr. Kwame? Mitumba team?
Yeah, welcome the
Mitumba consortium.
MCAK team consortium. Karibuni sana.
Dr. Karanja, can we have Dr. Karanja to help us?
Others will come this way because the space is more like this.
So, as we prepare for the launch, we'll have a quick photo and then we can have Reverend Teresia and Kwame remaining by the newly launched report. So we can have tighter photographs for our colleagues from the media. So, A microphone for Kwame or Reverend Teresia? Okay. Sorry, a second as we move the panel. To the count of 1, 2, 3, we declare the report launched. Some claps for the team.
Piga makofi mazuri.
Thank you very much. We can have Kwame and Reverend remaining on stage as the rest of us take our seats. Thank you very much for the support. Our very able partners from the media, you can have your photos, maybe the next 2 minutes, and then we'll straight away get into the Q&A. Very nice. Chapati, Kwame, please. And we have the QR code on the screens for those who may want to quickly grab the report as we go on. Utilize your devices as we all struggle and quickly embrace technology. Good. Thank you very much, our partners from the media. We'll walk straight into the Q&A. I'm still trying to make sure we finish our session by 20 minutes past midday. So there's a microphone going round. I will get support from the team. We can take the questions in sets of 3 so that we remember. So we'll have the first set of 3 questions, and then we can have a final set of 3. Introduce yourself, the organization you work from, and you're free to shoot from now. Thank you. I think we'll have Kwame still on stage because of the number of questions. You can use the podium if you're comfortable.
Good afternoon, everyone. My name is Juno Bolo, and I would like to say this is a good forum because I'm one of those people who were educated by Mutumba, and I grew up starting to sell Mutumba at the age of 5 years old, so I think I'm in the right place. My question is about the action point. The report is very interesting, and maybe this also goes to the consortia. Do we have a clear framework of action that can lead us in ensuring that some of our findings that we have are actually delivered? Because most of the time you get such reports, but you currently don't get the action points. The second thing is I want to really find out if the same report will be shared with the region, because I know that my kids and needs in Kisumu, Kibuye, where I used to sell, would want to interact with such a report and would like to be motivated. Thank you.
Next 2 questions, please. In the interest of time.
Good morning. Good afternoon, sorry. My name is Esther Diana from Standard Media Group. So I have 2 or 3 questions. So while you're showing us the importance of the Mitumba trade to the economy and by extension to Kenyans, it is also important to know that there's been an issue with falsification of invoices with regards to the trade of Mitumba. So as a consortium and by extension to the Institute of Economic Affairs, what can be done with regards to dealing with perhaps the traders who are not abiding by the laws and falsifying trade invoices? And to the Institute, what would be the economic implications to the taxman? And also experts have said that perhaps, and Kwame has reiterated this, that Mtumba is not the worst thing that has happened to Kenya's textile industry. So, in your view, what is the worst thing that has happened to the Kenya's textile industry, subsequently leading to its fall or rather decline? So, and also, just speak to us about tax implications of the trade.
Good, we can start with that, with those two questions.
All right, thank you very much for the questions. I think the question about the action points is perhaps I'll leave that to Teresia to speak on. Let me speak about whether the report will be shared with the region. I think that is for MCAK to consider. But Esther, you asked a question about the falsification of invoices. Let me say this. When government imposes a tax on a good or a service, for instance, right? It's incumbent in government to have the systems that enable it to actually verify that invoices are correct. So if any falsification is taking place, I think that definitely is illegal. And so that's an enforcement question that you could deal with. Now, our estimations are based on the amount of taxes that apply per container, and then secondly, the number of containers that are declared. And most of that is declared by customs. So yes, if there's any inefficiencies at the customs level that allow for cheating, obviously that's illegal, and I think an enforcement action should be taken about that. Secondly, you asked about the textiles industry. Let's consider that the questions we asked about this report were not what happened to Kenya's textiles industry. We asked ourselves, is it possible for a coexistence to happen? And our conclusive answer is the cheating, some of what we see here, and secondly, what happens to encourage diversion, because we have very leaky borders, so some of these equipment, some of these products may actually start leaking from other areas because the taxes are very, very high here. So it's important to have a level of tax that actually encourages maximum compliance. But if government imposes a tax, then it needs to have the systems to be able to collect it. The local textile industries are not happy with that. This is what I think, this has been documented. And one of those things is that industries in Kenya just became, towards the end of the 80s, and there was completely inefficient. They were very highly protected. For that reason, there was no investment in technology. Most of it were government industries. They did not pay farmers in time. The cotton varieties were not improved, so they were not the most efficient, and they just lost to competition. When they lost to competition, the presence of Mtumba and the liberalization then became clear. Became more salient. It does not mean that one killed the other, but it just means that efficiency and that ability to compete. Because the textiles industry, the apparel industry is a global one. So that's one. I'll finish with this because I need to say, when you hear people say questions such as, because I anticipated these questions, so that's why I'm prepared. The economic survey published by the National Bureau of Statistics came out about a week ago. And if you go to it, I think it's page 68, but I need to be clear. It shows us that last year in 2024, Kenya exported 68 billion worth of apparel exports globally. That same report shows that the value of imports from Mtumba was less than half of that, at 23 billion. Do you see it? So that argument that imports of Mtumba is affecting the ability to consume generally, domestically or not, is not even evident in those numbers. And in the last 20 years, for which the data from the National Bureau of Statistics has shown, there is no year in which Kenya's exports of apparel has been lower than Mtumba imports. Do you see? So there seems to be more or less like either growing together, or of course as COVID showed us, it doesn't. So that connection is what we hoped that this report would tell us. And then we can ask ourselves, so these are the facts.
exports of Kenyan apparel into other parts of the world are higher. Higher, definitely higher. Almost 2.5 times. I think 1.5 times. So that's not the connection that we'd like for today. What then government needs to do is to provide enough regulatory space for both industries to grow, regardless of what happens. But the choices of Kenyans will be, it will be important to respect the choices of Kenyans about where they choose to spend their money, one way or the other. But harming one is not necessarily going to grow the other. Thank you.
Wow, thank you so much. I will go straight to the lady who said what is the action plan after we have launched a very good document. What happens next? Number one, this document is to advise the government. The government, so many people have made remarks out of ignorance. That's why we have hired this institute to do an independent research and give recommendations. We have also welcomed institutions like Kipra to scrutinize the document and to help us have an independent document that can advise the government and make sure that one trade is not killed because of another trade, because it will not be fair. Our country promotes fair competition. Number two, I want to answer the question about falsification of invoices. I don't believe in Mitumba when you are paying taxes you need to falsify any document, because we are not charged based on invoice or amount of money you purchased. We are charged based on the weight. The reason being previously there were falsification of documents, so the government decided to charge us by kilograms. So 40-foot container, there is a specific rate. If you decide today to buy a 40-foot container of used clothes and you decide to tie stones there, and another one decides to put in clothes, you will still pay the same. You will not argue and say, but I'm carrying stones, they are less valuable. But if you declare this Mitumba, the charge is the same. So there's nothing like falsification of invoices to evade tax. Tax, 40-foot container is standard. Somebody in Mombasa, in Kisumu, anywhere, if you import a 40-foot container, you will be charged the same. Did we have another question? Thank you very much. Okay, there is somebody.
Shoot the last two questions, and for the media, we've been honored by Reverend here and Kwame for one-on-ones. For those who may need specific questions immediately after this, after we finish the session. So we can have the last two questions, please.
Yes, you.
Kwa majina naitwa Victor Mturi kutoka katika Radio France International Trade Service. Sekta hii ya Mitumba ikiwamiwa kwa uchafuzi wa mazingira katika nchi ya Kenya. Pengine mfanya nini kama washikadau wa mitumba kuweza kukabiliana na hali hii?
Asante sana, thank you for the question. Number one, I want to say, Mitumba traders are the number one people who are helping our environment by promoting the use of textiles or the use of garments. I want to imagine a scenario whereby we would be making 170,000 tons of new clothes every year. What will it do to our environment? We, Mitumba people, we are promoting reuse. We prolong life of textiles. We don't have to make clothes every year. We extend life of garments. That is promoting and supporting our environment. Thank you.
Thank you very much, Kwame and Reverend Teresia. I think that marks the end of our Q&A session, and in case there are any additional questions for our partners from the media, thank you very much for creating time and
sticking with us since when we started the session. We don't take that for granted. We know the number of assignments that you have to go through every single day. And the fact that you offered to stay with us and listen to our report is something we're really grateful. So for anybody who doesn't sit behind a microphone, a desk, or a TV screen, can we offer a hearty clap to our media partners? So I will shortly invite you again, Reverend, for the closing remarks, and that will mark the end of the formal version of today's event, but that doesn't stop us from networking. And for those who need to do the Q&As, Chris should be right behind the room on my right for the interviews. Thank you.
Thank you so much again. Habari zenyu. As we close, nataka kuongea on behalf of Mitumba Consortium Association. Sisi ni wafanyabiashara ambao tunafanya biashara na tumewajibika kama wazazi, kama wananchi, kama watu wa kawaida. Biashara hii ya mitumba imekuwa imezungukwa na kitu inaitwa misconception. People don't understand this trade. Tumekuja leo ndio tuweze ku-enlighten people na kuongea kuhusu biashara yetu na kuangalia na kusema ya kwamba hatuko hapa kama wana mitumba kuua our local textile industry, but we are here to promote it and to also say we can coexist. Ile representation tumeona hapa imeonyesha ya kwamba kila nyumba inanunua nguo mpya na inanunua mtumba. Kwa hivyo vile tuko hapa kwa nyumba, najua watu wengi wamevaa mtumba, na kama haujavaa leo mtumba, umewahi vaa mtumba, na kama haujawahi vaa mtumba, na ninataka kukushauri ujaribu, kwa sababu kama unataka kujua good quality clothes utazipata kwa mtumba. Kuna mtu amesema kitu ya muhimu sana juzi na akanifurahisha, ambaye ni mmoja wetu kwa hii biashara ya mitumba. Alisema it's only in mitumba where you get quality and affordability. You get the best quality and yet you can afford. Kwa hivyo sisi wote ambao tuko hapa, wacha sisi tuwe ndio ambassadors wa kusema mtumba iruhusiwe kuendelea. Hawezi ukasema nitafunga mtumba ndio ni promote local textile. Hiyo ni kupeana na mkono moja na kuchukua na mkono hii ingine. Lazima tukubali tupeane kwa mikono miwili with a healthy competition, tujaribu kurevive our own local textile industry na tuziruhusu zote zikae kwa soko, kwa sababu zote zinasaidia mwananchi wa kawaida. Najua Kwame ameongea na ameongea kizungu mingi. Mimi naleta Kiswahili. Naleta lugha ya mtaa. Lugha ya mtaa ni kusema hivi. Ameonyesha kuna nguo nyingi sana zinatengenezwa hapa nchini na zinaenda nje. Ameonyesha kuna nguo nyingi sana zinaletwa kutoka nje ambazo ni mpya. Na hiyo ripoti ikaonyesha mtumba imekuwa ni kama nusu ya zile zote zimeonekana zinatengenezwa na zile zinatoka nje zikiwa mpya. Kwa hivyo watu wasianze kusema ati kuna mitumba inakuwa dumped hapa ama inakuja kwa wingi sana. Hapana, mtumba haijakuja kwa wingi, imekuja kwa kiasi kile kinahitajika. Mwanabiashara akifanya biashara ikose wateja, anawachana na hiyo biashara. Lakini kama biashara inaonekana ina wateja, ni kumaanisha bado watu wako na njaa ya kupata hizi nguo za mtumba. Na nguo za mtumba zimepatia wananchi wa kawaida heshima ya maisha. Huwezi ukakutana na mtu amevaa kiraka. Ukienda kwa villages unapata watu wamevaa nguo smart, na this is courtesy of mitumba. Hakuna mwanadada ambaye ako New York amepiga jeans yake vizuri na jacket na mwanadada ambaye ako Kisumu. Wote wanafanana kwa sababu wote wamevaa jeans na wote wamevaa jacket ya jeans. Wote wako kwa fashion, wako trendy. Kila mtu amevaa vizuri. And this era ambayo ni ya internet, kila mtu amejua how to dress themselves. Wanaangalia kwa internet, wanaenda kwa soko. Wale wako Kisumu wako Kibuye, wale wako Western kuna soko za huko, Nairobi kuna soko za huko. Watu wote vile tumevaa hapa, hakuna mtu atakwambia wewe umevaa mitumba. Sisi wote tuko smart. Hakuna yule anaweza sema yangu ni mpya na mwingine aseme yangu mimi niko dignified sababu nimevaa mzee. Sisi wote tuko dignified kulingana na uwezo wetu na kulingana na klasi yetu. Kila mtu amevaa smart na kila mtu ako dignified. Na niseme sentence ya mwisho, dignity is when a father is able to afford clothes for his family. Dignity ni wakati mzazi amepata uwezo wa kupatia familia yake mavazi mazuri. That is what we call dignity. Through mitumba, watu wengi wamevalisha familia yao, wamefanya familia yao iko dignified through mitumba. Kwa hivyo mimi nasema hivi, tuchague mitumba, tuendelee kujenga nchi yetu na tuendelee kujikimu kimaisha. Asanteni sana na asanteni kwa kuja, asanteni kwa ile kazi mmefanya. I know there are people who have made this occasion possible. Mungu awabariki sana na tunashukuru sana. Thank you very much.
Is there anything else to say, really? No. Thank you very much. Chris, over to you for any interviews, any quick one-on-ones. As we wrap up, I think we can get a cup of coffee for those who hadn't gotten. And last but not least, the suppliers who supported us today, the team that did the sound, the videos, the team from Serena, the team that was supporting us on live streaming, thank you very much. We look forward to partnering with you again. And for the MC of the day, please clap for him, say hi to him as we leave the room.
This business, it has enabled me to educate my son all the way from primary school, secondary school, college life, and now he is working. So it has brought me from far.
Well, the mitumba industry is important in so many ways. The mitumba clothing, first of all, it employs a very large number of our population. We have a chronic unemployment situation in Kenya, so we are thankful that 2 million people are employed in that industry. We're also grateful that there is a widespread distribution system all over the country in which it provides clothing to 91% of our Kenyan population. That is millions and millions of people buy and wear second-hand clothing. The third element that as a legislator that I'm also grateful is the fact that we generate 18 billion shillings in tax revenues from the mitumba industry.
Mitumba nakupenda mitumba nakupenda.
We made an estimate at the Institute of Economic Affairs, judging from the integrated household budget survey, and triangulated these data together with speaking to traders. And it suggested to us that in both direct and indirect forms, people who trade for either directly or in addition to other firms, they are close to about 1.8 to about 2 million people who trade in second-hand clothing, all the way from the people who bring in the bulk to those who break bulk in different markets across Kenya. So basically, all manner of markets, from urban markets, which are much bigger, such as Nairobi, all the way to smaller markets. So it's about something like 1.8 to close to 2 million people.
With regards to textile waste, it is a problem, but it's by far one of the smallest problems, would be my summary statement. And I think we also need to distinguish between textile waste from which source, right? The majority of textile waste we get, which is around 1% of our total waste stream, is post-consumer textile waste. So it's not imported textile waste, it's not factory textile waste, it's what people have worn and after multiple cycles of wearing are throwing away, right? And then with regards to imported mitumba or second-hand textiles, I think from our point of view, that waste stream is almost negligible because the vast majority, I don't know, 98% plus of the imported textiles are for reselling and reuse. So that's waste we're not getting directly. We might get it a few years later once those textiles have been worn and discarded, but not at the point of importing.
Mitumba, they try to take you away. But Mitumba, you're here to stay.
So if you look at it, Kenya's liberalization of import and the use of second-hand clothes actually happened most substantially in the mid-90s. By that time, most of the textiles industries in Kenya, which were established some by government and some by private firms, had closed down. General business conditions were bad in general, and also incomes had not been growing for a while. So if you look at that mismatch, it is not correct to actually say that the main shock to these industries was second-hand clothes in general.
The cheap textile industry, actually that is the biggest threat to our local textile industry, is the massive new textiles that are coming in from Asia, from India, from Bangladesh, and increasingly from China. We can't compete with the prices, the low productive cost, the quality of those clothes that come from Asia. So to say that actually mitumba and new textile industries are in competition is a false analysis. It's not correct.
Mitumba, mitumba, nakupenda mitumba. Mitumba, mitumba, you're here to stay. Mitumba, mitumba.
Kutoka kwa mtumba naweza shukuru, at least nimeweza kujijenga.
Watoto kwenda shule, mimi hupata pesa kutoka kwa hii industry.
I believe if today the government decides to soften or to lower the prices of duty, of course the importers will also lower the prices.
Benefit sana. Jumali naishi, school fees nalipa, watu wangu kitu wanakula, I think kila kitu. Nilikuwa naishi rented house, hizi naishi kwangu. So ni mtumba.
The benefit is enormous. There's value added by sorting. So you become part of the supply chain. For example, clothes that are coming into this country today, into Kenya today, are being sorted in Europe, right? So a container of $10,000 from Britain going into Romania comes out of Romania actually valued at $15,000, right? So that's just an example. And that is just because it's been sorted in a certain way. However, we could actually have a sorting center here locally, shorten the supply chain and take the benefit, the economic benefit of a sorting center. Sorting centers are also labor intensive, so it would create huge employment opportunities. And in Kenya, we need that. The whole of Africa actually, but Kenya has a very large young population that is unemployed. And so we need to counter that. So sorting centers benefit in that way. They also will have an enormous environmental impact globally.
Yes, yes. I believe if today the government decides to soften or to lower the prices of duty, of course the importers will also lower the prices. And this will also affect the end person who is using the mitumba. So it will all be beneficial to the Kenyan people, to the people who are down there. Number one, let me tell you, mitumba has benefited mostly the housewives, people who have no education. They are able to raise their lives or their standard Mitumba trade has also benefited university graduates, students who are now upcoming. Before they get their dream job, this is where they start. This is where they begin. Some of them have not even pursued whatever they were pursuing. They got into the trade, it was successful, they are doing it comfortably. So it is a business that the government should put their eyes on. It is one of the business that is bridging the gap. The government is always talking about creating employment. Mitumba trade is creating employment. Look at today's statistics. We are over 2 million. 2 million people. Half of those people are not educated. They are not people with technical courses. They are just people who knew the principle of buy and sell. So this is a trade that should be respected worldwide. It is bridging the gap. It is giving people hope. Even those who are down there, who everybody thinks they can become nobody. We have testimonies of people they don't have school education, but today they are millionaires. They are employers. They are doing so well. Thank you.
Kitu cha kwanza ni kanjo huwa wanasumbua. Hiyo ni policy ya kwanza. Maybe wanaweza organize na kanjo wawe tu wanakata either license ama wafanye vile hawatakuwa wanatulipisha on a daily basis. Cha pili ni kuleta mali. Kumekuwa na ukosefu wa mali kama vile nimesema. Wanaweza fanya bidii tukapata mali, itaweza kubenefit watu wengi na vijana wengi na pia watu wengi wanaofanya mitumba.
I think one of the things we have been fighting for and we are looking for and we are putting these suggestions to the government is that they should reduce the cost of duty. The cost of duty is costing us about $14,000. That money is going direct to the government. Duty, tax and VAT. About $14,000 going direct to the government. The Mitumba traders are generating a revenue of 1 billion Kenya shillings per month. Mitumba traders, they are generating a revenue for the government, an amount of 1 billion per month. That makes it 12 billion per year. That is the revenue that is generated by the Mitumba traders.
One of the things that Kenya specifically could do is to create a sorting center and have the right policies in place, because there is a danger with sorting centers that it could become a dumping ground.
Main challenge in Mitumba industry are the high taxes. If the government can reduce the taxes, Mitumba industry can be a bit better.
Currently, we are facing a big problem because of the pandemic. The effects of the pandemic, we are not able to get good supply like before. We are encountering problems with the shipping. For example, some shipping lines have hiked their prices to very, very big margin. It's becoming very difficult, but we are also in communication with the government. We are requesting our government to soften or to ease the burden of duty with the Mitumba traders. One of our biggest challenge is the duty. 40-foot container is costing us a whopping $18,000 just to have one container enter Kenya. So the burden is also transferred to the small-scale trader and even to the last person. So those are the few challenges that we are facing after the ban was lifted.
This trade is being negated because of cheap labor. So for example, you're paying very cheap labor in Bangladesh and in China to manufacture certain goods that are being sold in the global north. Now, for manufacturers to compete, they actually have to pay those kind of wages. The only way manufacturing can increase in Africa is by subsidies. The government has to subsidize manufacturing in Africa. Otherwise, it's not going to take off. We're not competing directly with Mitumba. It's a misunderstanding of the situation.